let's get into it. We're going to do some live demos as well, and hopefully those will go well. We're not afraid of that. So we're going to see how they go. Hopefully, no hallucinations, but this is for real. So why are we talking about this today? Well, this recent sort of interesting data analysis, this company Sumbul looks at hiring for different projects and on LinkedIn and job boards. And based on their data, one of the top use cases for AI within corporations, large corporations, is cleansing, processing, and analyzing data. Um, so even though I feel like often the number one use case is sending me spam, it seems like enterprises are actually going after this in a very serious way. And it's interesting to see what tools are in development out there. And we certainly think that we're onto something here at Gigasheet. Um, I'm going to try to do this poll here, and we're going to see. I have a quick question that you should be able to answer here, and hopefully you'll see it now. So I'm curious, what is your LLM of choice? Which LLM do you use? Personally, I am a big ChatGPT user. I subscribe to their Plus plan. And more recently, Claude. I actually find Claude writes really nicely. Um, but I've tried pretty much all of them, and I dabble in many different ones. Yeah, I find myself using Google occasionally too. We run on kind of the G Suite, and it's kind of baked into that. So even without realizing it, I'm using it there. So that's the first question. What's your LLM of choice? And then the second question is, have you used an LLM to analyze data? And um, the answer options are yes, with tons of success. For those of you who are responding with that, I'd love to talk to you. Yes, with limited success. That's probably what I have done, or no, haven't tried it at all. Actually, zero people have said no, they haven't tried it at all, which is good for this audience. Um, so personally, when it works with data, the LLM, like when I use ChatGPT, it is quite impressive and increasingly capable. It usually writes Python code to analyze my data and presents the results. Um, while I started my career as a software engineer, I am not in a position to review the Python code for correctness, and often I'm skeptical of the results. Sometimes, especially when I'm working with large data sets, it just doesn't work at all, or it gets stuck in loops where it's not able to answer my question. But I think they will probably continue to improve this, and it offers tons of promise, and I expect it will continue to evolve rapidly and be able to handle more data in the future. But let's see. So far, the number one response on LLMs is 70% of people use ChatGPT, followed by Google Gemini with 10%. And a handful of people are using nothing or other. In terms of the um, the LLM to analyze data, 11% of people have had tremendous success. 78% of people have had limited success, and 11% of people none. And I certainly fall into the majority in both of these. I use ChatGPT, OpenAI mostly, and then I've had some success, and it is interesting and certainly impressive. So with that, let's dive into some of the work that we're doing here. And it's specifically around analyzing data. And what we're doing is pushing to take that analytic capability that LLMs have today and push it even further and extend it more. If you're not familiar with Gigasheet, we are a software analytics platform, and we also do a lot of work with data, primarily healthcare data, but lots of different types of data sets as well. Usually it has to do with market intelligence in one form or another. And really why we built this company is people seem to get lots of use out of data when it's modestly sized, but when it becomes extremely large, like tens or hundreds of millions of rows of data, all of a sudden it's impossible to get answers out of without a data team, a database, a warehouse, and lots of engineering effort and writing code like SQL. Um, but we really think it shouldn't have to be that difficult to just get answers out of large data sets, and that's why we've developed Gigasheet. It can be really painful working with this data, but we're trying to make that really easy. So we've built an interface that looks and feels a lot like a spreadsheet that scales to billions of rows that we'll talk about. But our overall goal is just to make it easier to get insights out of these enormous data sets. And that can be in our user interface. It can be in an AI or chat interface. It could be via an API. And it, to us, as long as you can get the answers in a usable form, it's sort of all goodness. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that today. Um, this is, if you're unfamiliar, this is what the Gigasheet user interface looks like. As I mentioned, it looks and feels a lot like a spreadsheet with common features and functions of spreadsheets, but it also has capabilities of a data warehouse. It's highly performant and very efficient at handling large data sets, and you can do database things that normally aren't available in spreadsheets, like in the example here where you're doing a group, but you could also build pivot tables and things like that. So um, the cool thing about this is we allow you to interact with the entire data set. We're not creating an aggregate or a roll up or a sample. Like when you work with hundreds of millions of rows in Gigasheet, you're working with the entire data set, not a roll up or a sample. We have lots of customers who use it to explore and analyze data, and many of them are using the AI capabilities that we've developed and deployed in the product today. And we're also going to be showing today some of the newer stuff that's coming down the road. So with that, let's get into it. So AI and Gigasheet. We use AI and Gigasheet in three different areas primarily. These are not the only areas, but that's what we're going to cover today, are these three areas. So we use it in data ingest or data loading, in the cleaning and extraction of data. So we allow people to load any number of different data types into our product. And especially JSON files that are complex. We spend a lot of time working on that, particularly in the healthcare space. And we do a lot of schema inferencing there. We'll talk about that. In our user interface, which I'll show you a demonstration of today, we'll try it out, see how it goes. There are a couple of areas in the user interface that I just showed in that animation that we'll look at. And then in private beta, we have a new capability, which is super exciting, that Garth's going to demonstrate. And that's how you can extend an LLM to work with Gigasheet, which we'll get into. So first of all, let's talk about the data cleansing and that ingest process. I mentioned schema inferencing. So when people load in an arbitrary JSON file, or when we come across JSON machine readable files, we have to sort of assess how best to present that to the user. And obviously AI is good at those kinds of things, as well as data summarization. You know, what's in this data set? A lot of times people are unfamiliar with the data set, or just describe it to me in natural language. It's super good at that. This is specific, these next two are specific to the healthcare space, and we do specific things for different verticals. But in healthcare, there's a lot of noisy data in these machine readable files. So we're removing that noise and identifying like specific attributes in the case of insurance plans and things like that. Um, in the application itself, we have a couple of different areas where AI appears. We've been developing these over the course of the last year or so, and we'll show you kind of the latest progress there. We have an AI formula builder that translates natural language text to Excel-like formulas, which is really handy. And then we have a sheet assistant, which is kind of like a copilot that helps you analyze large data sets within Gigasheet. So I'll break out of this right now and show you a quick demonstration of these capabilities.
While he's getting this set up, I'll just mention
Yeah.
something about the ways we use it in our data processing, which is, there's a lot of companies that are actually sort of trying to do it AI only, and they'll say we just drop it in and the LLM figures everything out magically. We actually were building these sort of processing pipelines before the big explosion of LLMs and everything. So we have a ton of processing that is not AI centric and is our own sort of algorithms and so on. And we found that by far the best is when you're able to do both in, as needed, sort of, and apply them in their right spots. There's some things where it's just exactly the same every time, and you wouldn't want to have an AI sort of get in the mix. But on the other hand, there'll be cases where data comes in and it's not something you're going to be able to define a pattern ahead of time or things like that. And there the LLM can really shine. So I just wanted to mention that, it's sort of we try to take the best of both worlds.
Yep. I see, by the way, good time to point out, I see some questions coming in. Please place your questions in the Q&A panel. We'll come to those at the end. Happy to answer questions. So if you do have questions, please head to the Q&A panel and type those in. Thanks. So let's take a look at some data here in Gigasheet to start off with, just to sort of level set what we're looking at. This is healthcare data, it's pricing data, and you can see here it's 206 million rows of data that we're looking at. And we'll just give a quick overview of what's in this to familiarize you with it. It has the name of a procedure, a billing code, a negotiated rate, how much it costs, and or how much the provider is paid rather. Has a bunch of codes in this column and some other codes here. Has a taxonomy code, which equates to the specialty of the provider. So you can see here, we've got a lot of different providers in this data set, the name of the person, their location, zip code, and some other details here. So this is the data set that I've got open and that we'll play with quickly here. So there are a couple of ways we integrate and continue to invest in building in AI features that just make it a lot easier to use this interface, the spreadsheet-like interface. And the first is we have formulas. So in Gigasheet, you could calculate new columns using formulas, kind of like you would in a typical spreadsheet. But you'll notice here we have this Use AI toggle button here. And this is just super handy. It's not really complex by any means, but I really wish they had this in like every spreadsheet product and other places too. But basically what you can do is use it to write formulas. So let's take a look at a column, for example. So this column, if I look at some of our filters, you can see sometimes this has a list. So sometimes it's just one code, 10-digit code, and sometimes there are many 10-digit codes in this particular column. Sort of a common thing that happens in data. Um, and you can use the AI helper to help you write formulas. So you can also toggle this off and you can write formulas using, typical spreadsheet-like syntax. But I really like this because let's say I just want to take that first code out of the taxonomy column, this primary taxonomy codes column. So I'll say write the first 10 characters of the primary taxonomy code and hit generate formula. And what it does is it translates that to an Excel-like formula, which is super cool and very handy. Now, this one isn't particularly complicated. And if you're really familiar with spreadsheets, you could have cranked that out yourself without too much trouble. But where this becomes really helpful is things that are more complex. Like, for example, here, there are lots of codes, this place of service, and these codes equate to different things. So let's say, I'll just call this place, and I'll say if the place contains 11, write office rate. If it contains 21, 22, or 24, write hospital. And this will take a second and it generates this, it uses regular expressions, which again, I'm somewhat familiar with having a technical background, but I haven't like written regex in forever. So I can never remember the syntax. And it shows you a quick preview of this here. And when you hit add column, it'll go through the whole thing and do it. Now, this is 206 million rows of data, so it might take like 30 seconds usually less actually to add a column of data, but you get the idea of how this can be used to translate natural language into syntax that's more complicated. The cool thing also is because it writes in a syntax at least I can understand. I can check it and I can see the preview and sort of validate that the AI is doing what I expect. The second area in the user interface where we've integrated um, AI is this Sheet Assistant. So talk a little bit about the Sheet Assistant. The Sheet Assistant is kind of like a co-pilot and it has some guardrails on it. So the Sheet Assistant can help with just the data in this sheet. And it has metadata about the columns in the sheet and the data types of those columns, and it understands that. And of course, it has some general knowledge as well, but it's pretty strictly focused on just this sheet. So the AI in the formula builder is really just focused on helping you build formulas. And the AI here is really focused on helping you analyze data in this interface. And we can ask it questions like this. So which medical specialty has the highest average rate for 99214? Um, Now, I didn't tell it what 99214 is. Now, I know it is a billing code because it's a common billing code in this kind of data. But in this example here, it has figured that out on its own. And I said medical specialty. And so it looked at the columns and it figured that out. So it tells me what it's doing each step of the way. We think this is super important for explainability and transparency because like I said at the beginning, one of the problems with some of the analysis that's done by things like ChatGPT is it's done in Python or R or Pandas, which I can kind of look at that code and understand what's going on, but it's difficult to validate it's done exactly what I asked it to do. Whereas in this case, I can click here and see exactly which filter it used to get to this data. And it grouped on this column, medical specialty, which looks to be correct. And it has sorted by negotiated rates, and it's responded with an answer here. So, and it all looks correct. Now, sometimes it makes mistakes, just like all AI does, but at least here you can see exactly what it did and edit it. We find people use this a lot just to learn how to use the user interface, and it guides them. And you can do follow-up questions with it as well here. So you could say, like, what about just for Boise? So it understands to continue the analysis, and hopefully it'll filter this down to just the location where city equals Boise. Again, I didn't tell it like Boise is a city. This is sort of that LLM where it figures out how to reason and do it that way. So it'll take a second. It'll reconfigure the sheet, and it says here what it's done. And I can double check that it did it correctly, and it looks like it did. So this is how it works with that. So that's a pretty quick and simple example of how the Sheet Assistant helps people analyze data in Gigasheet. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Garth. So this stuff is available in our product today. It's generally available, and you can try it out. And we continue to improve it and work on it all the time. But speaking of improvements and innovations, one of the things that we've been developing is the MCP capability, which Garth will talk about. And that is how can you leverage your LLM to analyze hundreds of millions of rows of data, much more than it could store in its memory? Uh, and that is what we're tackling with MCP. So Garth, I'll let you talk about this part.
Thanks, Jason. So I'm gonna guess that most folks who decided to come to an AI presentation have used an LLM in some form. We're still use the terms interchangeably. It's like the AI, the LLM, or some people even just call them the GPTs or chat GPTs. Um, LLM is a large language model, and they're all in the same sort of category. That you talk to them, you sort of chat to them, and they talk back to you. And it's a really cool, really exciting, and comparatively new. Um, Folks may be less familiar with MCP or Model Context Protocol. So I am going to just start by describing what that is. Um, and I'll describe it in terms of the problem it's trying to solve. So all these LLMs, AIs, large language models, Um, they're really exciting because they can tell you answers. They answer your questions. They seem to know everything, or, they act like they know everything. Um, but pretty early on, folks realized that sometimes when you're interacting with one of these, it's not enough to just respond from kind of what it already has in the training data. You'd like the AI to be able to go out and do actions for you, sort of as an agent. That's the way that people think about it. It's going to act as an agent, and that could be things like browsing the web or interacting with things on your computer, like your files, or talking to other services to get information or take actions for you. And so people said, oh, this is great. And what a great idea. We'll equip our LLMs with tools. Um, but the problem was that each tool had a different way that it would interact with the LLM. It sort of offered different capabilities and responded in a different way, and there was no sort of standard thing. So if you wanted to, have an LLM that could interact with tools, you'd have to sort of write a separate, connect in a separate way to each of these different tools, and this big explosion of possible communication patterns between the core LLM, like ChatGPT or Claude or whatever, and the tools. This was a problem. And MCP, the Model Context Protocol, it was invented as a solution to that problem. And what MCP does, it's a protocol, so it defines a way of interacting, and it says if you have an LLM and you have a tool, here is a standard way for those two things to connect and talk to each other, and then you can have it, do the actions or do whatever that tool is for. So that was what MCP is for, and it's very new. It was introduced, I believe, in November of last year, so it's less than a year that it's been around. And so we don't really know where it's gonna go. We don't. It could evolve. It might be that something else comes along and takes its place, but it is, it's a good solution to a real problem, which is that it's a very powerful thing to have an LLM that can interact with the world outside of its little chat. That is a very powerful idea. And there is a need to standardize that in some way. And MCP is a great solution. So that is Model Context Protocol. Okay, why are we talking about Model Context Protocol? Well, why is it interesting to do that for Gigasheet? So one of the things that LLMs themselves are, pretty good and useful for is doing data analysis, but there's a problem, which is that you can only upload so much data. You can't, their sandboxes are maybe 100 megabytes or whatever. So if you have a small amount of data, that's great. But if you have larger data sets, then you need to break out of that chat and use something, use a tool. And so that's exactly that's what we're going for here with our integration is you can use Gigasheet to analyze much, much larger data or have access to much, much larger data via this sort of tool idea using the MCP protocol. And so there's sort of a diagram at the bottom there where you have, your computer on the left where that's you talking to the LLM, you're doing that chat interaction. And then via the MCP protocol, the cloud, you'll talk to Gigasheet's MCP, which is kind of our side of the AI. And then, our AI will be interacting with the Gigasheet warehouse and doing the actual work to sort of run the queries or do the analytical steps and then giving information back all the way back to the LLM that you're interacting with, and then it will present it to you. So that's kind of the picture. And let's look at a demo, live demo. So I'm just going to share my screen here. So here is Claude Desktop. So you may be familiar with different ones like ChatGPT or GPT Desktop or other ones. But Claude is just another one of these sort of AI tools, LLMs. And we have equipped it with Gigasheet via MCP. So for this demo, let's suppose that I own a chain of radiology practices in Minneapolis, and I'm interested in expanding. I would like to find some more practices to add to my ever-growing chain. Um, and my pitch to them, when so I want to go find one. I want to go, find somebody to call up and say, hey, you should become part of my chain here. My pitch to them is going to be that they can make more money because I have relationships with insurers and I have, leverage because I have all these practices. And so I can get better reimbursement rates from the insurance companies so that when a patient comes into the practice and they, do the imaging or whatever, they can get, more money from the insurance company for providing that service. So that's going to be, that's the pitch I want to make to a new practice to try and find a practice to add. Um, and in order to make that pitch, it would be extremely helpful, maybe even essential, if I can know the current rates that they have contracted with the insurance companies. So I can go in and I can say, I know exactly how much better a deal I could, get for them versus what they have today. And luckily, in Gigasheet, I have rate data. This is public data that the US healthcare companies are required to publish about their contracted rates. It's very complicated data and it's very big data. And luckily, Gigasheet is able to make sense of that data and it's sort of nicely clean it and use some of those techniques that Jason was talking about. So the data is, good, but it's still very large, much larger than I could just sort of dump into the chat here. And so that's why I'm going to use the Gigasheet AI integration here in Claude to help me figure out, a practice that I should contact and get some numbers. So that's kind of the scenario. So let's try it out. And maybe this is the first time that I have done this. So I'm just going to start by asking it to take a look at a file here and tell me what's in here. Like, what is this data? What do I have here? Is this even, is this even going to be helpful? Um, and so what it's going to do here is you can see it says, I'll take a look at your gig sheet, see what it contains. And then there's this little analyze box. And the analyze box is where it's connecting to Gigasheet and asking Gigasheet to run some queries, do this analytical work. And then you can see, okay, I have Minnesota data and 293 million rows. That's lots and lots of data. And these sort of important fields here. This looks like it's going to be very helpful for, this scenario for what I'm trying to do. So, okay, great. Let's see. I'm in Minneapolis, so let's just make sure. You'd think that it would have data for Minneapolis, but let's just make sure. I'll ask it, does it have data for Minneapolis? And you can see once again that Claude here, the large language model, is connecting to Gigasheet and performing the analysis for me. So it's going to go check and see if we have data. And yes, it does. All right, we have millions of rows for Minneapolis. Great. Okay, things are looking excellent. So now maybe I need to think a little bit, what do I want to actually do with this data? And I'm trying to evaluate, find, a good practice to contact. So um, I might not know. I know the kind of stuff they do. They do brain imaging, but I might not know, the specific fields, the specific codes. There's a lot of, really, all this terminology and taxonomies and so on. So I'll ask it, see if it can tell me if there's going to be a good code for me to use. And depending on what it does here, I could also ask it to search the web or do other things. That's kind of the power of having the LLM sort of do this work is it can interact with all kinds of different systems. And, Gigasheet is one of those and, sort of becomes part of a whole workflow. So, okay, 70551, that looks great. That works for me. All right, let's use 70551. So now we're going to ask it a more complicated question. And we're going to say, let's use 70551. What are the range of rates for Minneapolis providers that are radiologists? Show me three with rates that are 10% to 1,000% of the Medicare rate. So here, I may be bringing in a little kind of knowledge of my own uh, about how I want to make use of this data set. So I'm asking for radiologists that, I know those are the kind of folks I'm going for. I'm using that code that I asked for in the previous question. And then here, I'm just kind of, this is like sort of maybe a sort of a data science, mindset. I'm saying, look, maybe there's weird outliers or special contracts or other things in this data, and I kind of want to bracket it. So let's take, anything that is a tenth to 10x of the standard Medicare rate, which I know is included in this data set. And we're just going to stay in there. And that way I'll kind of get rid of anything that's really sort of outside the normal bounds. And I probably could have arrived at those numbers, maybe I could arrive at that by analyzing this data more first or whatever, but I'm going to come in with that kind of data science mindset and put that restriction on it. Okay, so we've got our examples here, and here are three entries. And I'm just going to say, we'll grab the cheapest, the one with the lowest rates, where I could maybe really help them out. And I'll say, maybe look for a phone number for Dr. Colts here. Let's see. And if we can't find him, we could try another one. We could ask for more examples, but let's see if we can get a phone number for this doctor, this provider who is coming in, well below the standard rate. Excellent. We've got him here. So now I might give him a call. So you can kind of see, the specifics are maybe less important, but what you kind of see from this demo is that I was able to walk through this data set, starting with really not a lot of familiarity about what's in there, and then kind of getting more specific, getting some help from the general knowledge of the LLM. And via this AI integration with Gigasheet, I could get down to some really precise, impactful details like his phone number and these specific numbers. And so now when I pick up the phone, I'm going to be in a really good position to make a super compelling pitch, and I could do this without ever having to pull on like a deep sort of technical data analysis background. I might have some technical knowledge, or I might have some good like maybe I might be a little bit clever, like when I use this 10 to 1,000%. I might have some ideas that I bring to the table, but I did not have to write SQL code. I did not have to even write Excel formulas. I didn't have to sort of rely on my own analysis skill set. I could really focus on my goal, the problem I was trying to solve, and understanding what's coming out of the data. And just with that, through the Gigasheet AI integration, I could walk through this data in a very natural, sort of chat-oriented way and come to some really cool, really specific findings that were completely tailored for what I was trying to do. So I think it's a really powerful way to do it. Again, MCP is really new. So we're going to be waiting, and we're going to be sort of participating and seeing how it evolves. But I think there's a really powerful things that you can do with an integration like this between an LLM like Claude Desktop and Gigasheet. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Jason for maybe one final example and some final thoughts.
Thanks for that, Garth. Yeah, I think Garth showed a nice demo there, but just to, I think I've been working with this and on some kind of real work, and it is actually a lot of fun and useful to do. Like this is an example of something I did, and it took maybe this was over the course of a couple hours because you can task the agent to do things and do research and come back. Like here, I basically fed it several hundred million rows of data sheet that contains several hundred million rows and asked it for like rates for GI doctors in Minneapolis. And you can see here the steps it took. And actually, if you expand these and you wanted to inspect exactly like the filters it was using in Gigasheet, you can actually see what it did there. And it's trying different approaches. So it has some resilience where it retries things. And then it ultimately comes up with the rates in a similar way. This is not too different than Garth's demonstration there. But the reason that I thought this is really cool is because you can actually leverage a lot of the other stuff the LLM can do. Like I asked it to build me a dashboard of these results. So you can see here, it's able to present data visualizations, uh, build a Word doc report of this. I could, of course, tweak it or tell it, I use my font and logo in this, but it's really exciting and I think it's fun. But uh, So that's a little bit about what we're doing at Gigasheet. This capability with MCP is still in private beta for our enterprise customers, but we're really excited about it. And we have some new stuff we're working on that we won't be talking about today, but stay tuned for that. It's really pushing the boundaries much further in advance. I see we have a number of questions. So Garth, I'll ask you to come back on and put you to work here for some of them. Please submit your questions in the Q&A panel. I see a couple and I will get to those. One of them was, I think maybe I answered it before, but it was like, can the AI assistant take direct action in the spreadsheet? And specifically wanted to know if you could add columns. So you can. So I showed how you could use columns in the formula builder, for example. But let's say I was over here doing this analysis on the right, and I said, add a column that, I don't know, let's say takes the first three characters of the zip code. Sometimes people use like zip 3 to look at a broader geographic area. And maybe I want to create a column for that. So let's see if it works. So roll the dice here and see what happens. But it does have the ability to use the formula builder as well, so that it can actually add data to this, but one of the core design patterns of Gigasheet is not to destroy the original underlying data. And so we take that. So you can see it added, let's see if it worked. It added columns here. Yeah, looks like it did. So you can use the formula builder obviously here, but you can also talk to it in the chat, which is pretty cool. Let's see. Another question. Can the AI assistant analyze multiple sheets and link them together using unique keys to build a fuller data set and create roll-ups through those? Really good question. Not yet. So right now, the sheet assistant that's built into the application just has visibility of the current sheet. Now, in Gigasheet, we have the ability to do joins or VLOOKUPs or appends where you can pull together multiple tables. So right now, if you were in Gigasheet, you'd need to do the joining yourself and then have the assistant do the work. However, with the new stuff with MCP, that opens the door. You could imagine, say, like use all the data in this folder or use all the data you have available. And down the road, we definitely see the potential to do either federated queries or have it join data or, let it decide how best to do it. So really, really good question.
Even today in
Yeah.
the with the MCP AI integration, um, it chooses. I gave it one sheet in the demo, but it's not fixed to just use that sheet. It can interact with any Gigasheet that you as the user are authenticated to. And so, if you had something where you have like a list of people in one sheet and then, some information about them in a different sheet, like their, purchasing activity or something, um, it could write a query to one, get some data, and then use that to query the other, which is a little different from a join, but it is, there was be nothing preventing it from sort of doing that within its own kind of chat context and joining data in that way. So different from a join because it wouldn't be able to sort of run like an analysis that required sorting one whole sheet by another whole sheet or something like that. But the AI integration can pull from multiple places and work with and overlap and combine data within its chat context.
Cool. Thanks, Garth. Another question. I sort of answered it and touched on it before, but is Gigasheet able to cross lookup values from multiple sheets? Very much related. And yes, we talked about how the AI is not able to do the joins yet, but with MCP, like Garth mentioned, you can feed it multiple sheets. There is a function here called cross-file VLOOKUP. Cool thing about this is it, works on hundreds of millions of rows of data. So if I had maybe an ID number or maybe additional information about this phone or tax ID or something, and I wanted to cross-reference another file, you can absolutely do that. You choose the file, You choose the column you want to match on, and you can bring in matching values that way. So, kind of in the same vein of what we were just talking about. I'll let you take this one, Garth. Is MCP one directional or is it bidirectional? For example, could Claude make changes in the Gigasheet file like the one you gave it?
Yeah, that's a great question. The short answer is no, but I will explain a little bit. So, um, because the technology of LLMs is so new, we are we're being a little cautious, I guess. We'll be sensibly conservative about it. So we have a very, very strong security model with the LLM where essentially anything that it does, queries or anything, is actually executed as as the caller. It has no special access, has no behind the scenes access to anything. And so anything that it can do, you could do by pushing the right buttons in the UI or whatever. So we're very comfortable with the security. But even setting aside any security concerns, they are prone to, they sometimes make mistakes. They do silly things. You read all the stories about hallucinations or people that have let them run wild in their code base and it deletes all their code or stuff. And so until there's a little more sort of, technological advancement, we really don't want them to mess up your data. So right now, the integration over MCP is totally read only. I can absolutely imagine a world where you'd want it to insert columns or correct the data. That could be really powerful. So there's tons of use cases there, and it's a great, great question. So I think in the future we are probably going to go in that direction. But right now we're keeping it safe. We really don't want it to, just stomp all over your data and mess something up.
Yeah, makes sense. Um, Another question, is fuzzy search possible? This is from Samir. He asked the question about the VLOOKUP, so I'll assume maybe it's related. In the VLOOKUP, there is a near match capability, which basically does some very basic fuzzy searching, like ignores white space and case, for example, and maybe punctuation, I think. But we do have capabilities in Gigasheet for formulas for things that aren't really possible in spreadsheets, or perhaps they are, but you would have to write a lot of code in VBScript or Google Apps script or something like that. And one example of that is Levenstein distance or edit distance matching. And we do have capabilities built into Gigasheet. It doesn't require AI, it's just a lot of math. And so it is very powerful, though. Let's
I'll
see.
just also note we do have, if Samir's question was more about just filtering data, we have quite flexible filtering operators, including just full-on regex. So, if you wanted to do something where you're like, drop all the spaces and drop all these and normalize case, and you could do that with a lot of that can be done with regex, and we do just support plain old regex in the filtering, so you can filter for any regex match.
And you could totally imagine, I mean, obviously AI is awesome at writing code. And so you could you can see where this is going, right? Um, Things like data normalization, cleanup, or editing. Uh, and speaking of editing, Adam asks, follow up to the edit question, what about creating a new independent file from multiple inputs using MCP? I'm gonna let you take that one, Garth.
Another great one. So still no, so fully read only currently, but absolutely, we see that as a potential future enhancement where you're going to have the LLM generate something, maybe based on, something you gave it or pulling from a sheet or a pair of sheets and generating a new data set, and then you want to push that. So we imagine that coming in the future. We also imagine asking the LLM to find data for you. So Gigasheet has very, very powerful data ingestion capabilities that do not require that you sort of know the schema in advance or know you can just hand us a file and we'll figure it out. And so we imagine allowing via MCP, telling LM, hey, I want to go find me some data set about blah, blah, blah. And you just hand that over to Gigasheet and we turn it into, structured data that you can then interact with and query and so on. So today, no, fully read only, based on our kind of uh, caution about just the behavior of LLMs in general. Read only, but yes, a great question and something that we do imagine coming in the future.
Yeah, I think, we are cautious one of the things MCP does that is lacking is security, right? So I think we are pretty much on the bleeding edge with this stuff, but we are trying to be careful about that. So these are great questions. Thanks. One more question for you, Garth. Can you integrate this with ChatGPT the way you did with Claude?
So on the desktop, yeah, in general, you can do these kind of things with the desktop version. So if you want to run GPT desktop, you could do that. Um, Currently, because it is so new and it is really it's bloody, as Jason said. So not possible in the web version of Claude or ChatGPT, the sort of web only version, but on desktop, yes.
Yeah. And I know, well, I saw a headline anyway, so I think that Google has adopted MCP support for it. At least they're saying that. So it is still really new. We'll see how easy it is. It seems like Claude and Anthropic right now are the leaders. And worth pointing out, I think Anthropic is who pioneered the protocol. I'm
Yeah,
pretty
yeah, they wrote it. They wrote up the spec and they're sort of the ones in charge of it. But it is, again, it's so new and we're just going to kind of be participating in this evolution and trying to get the best we can. So,
exactly. Regardless of Claude or ChatGPT and how it takes form, I think that one thing is for sure, most people who have a white collar job that does not require intricate hand-eye coordination, building something, their job is going to be very much impacted by this kind of technology, and best to be either you ride the wave or you drown in it. So I think it's really important as we look forward and keep working on this. And it's a really exciting time. Um, so are there, oh, we're getting a couple more questions. We still have some time, so I'll take them or hand them to you, Garth. So are there additional instructions available for using MCP on desktop versions of LLM models? Uh,
okay, so that's a great question. I appreciate that question, whoever asked that question. So, yeah, I wrote it up. So, there's a blog post on our website that describes how to do it. But to be perfectly upfront, I was surprised by how difficult it was in Claude. So, I think that because the protocol is so new, the LLM products are not they haven't really smoothed out the rough edges. So, my actual suggestion is send us an email at support@gigasheet.com or sales@gigasheet.com and we can talk about what that would look like. So we maybe that's really my best recommendation, but if you want to read a little bit, there is a blog post and I describe how I did it. But my real hope is that I think the products like Claude Desktop, the product needs to advance to make it easier for end users. It really feels today like it is primarily at a level where developers can use it. So depending on where you're at, that might work for you or not. But definitely feel free to get in touch, sales@gigasheet.com. We'd love to talk to you about it.
Yeah, I will say I was able to do it, but what Garth's talking about is figuring out like the right places to go in Claude to do it is tricky. But I was able to follow the instructions in his blog and get it working now that he documented it well. So in general, it is not well documented, generally speaking, but this particular, beta prototype that we have built is Garth did a nice job on that. A couple more questions here. Maybe we'll answer this one together. I'll start and then let you provide the more technical response. But it just says, is it able to analyze and assist in identifying the best key indicators to create or creating predictive algorithms based on the data set? So in the Sheet Assistant, no, I don't think so. In the MCP, yes, I think that is possible. Uh, and I could totally imagine it looking at the data, using kind of general knowledge, and if you can give it some context about the problem set, that it could look at it and suggest those uh, ways that you might do predictive analytics. on this data. Garth, I'll let you. This is really
I would agree. I mean, we don't have like a special sort of prediction package or anything like that that's built into the product. But if you were to set up this AI integration over MCP and say, take a look at, type in the chat, take a look at this data. I'm interested in predicting whatever you want to predict. What are the best columns to use? What are the best factors I should use? It probably could use its general knowledge to make some good guesses and then maybe validate those by doing some analysis to make sure that that there were actually a good range of different numbers in the column or whatever, right? So, I definitely could imagine doing that work over that MCP AI integration. We don't have a built-in thing, but absolutely. And I think that would be a nice sort of you'd nicely take advantage of some of that like trained in knowledge that's in LLMs in general about, what are some good algorithms for the problem you're trying to solve.
there you go. Okay. I think we'll leave it there. Really good questions. Good stuff. Thanks for participating. Always better when people participate. And we hope you enjoyed it. If you are interested to learn more about this or how you can use Gigasheet, please email our sales team, sales@gigasheet.com. I see all those emails as well, so I'll take a look at it and happy to jump in when it's appropriate. But with that, thank you, Garth. Great demos. And thanks everybody for joining. We had a really good turnout and thanks for participating. Talk to
Thanks,
you soon.
everyone.
Bye.
Bye bye.